So we have to remind ourselves, what happens when there's a number in front of your function or outside of your function? What's that going to affect, the x or the y values? It's going to affect the y values. And what is that 2/3 going to do to our y values? It's going to multiply our y values by 2/3, exactly what we see. So the question says just determine the amplitude, but what we're going to do for each of these is we're going to graph them as well, because we're going to start practicing our graphs, and the answer to the question is going to come easily once we've graphed it. So if we were going to graph y equals 2/3 of x, we're going to multiply our y values by 2/3. Now, a couple of things about graphing sine and cos. What we're going to do is we're going to label our maximum and our minimum. Now, on our parent graph, sine had a maximum of 1 and a minimum of -1. And those are y values. Now, if we multiply those by 2/3, our maximum now will be 2/3 times 1, which will just be 2/3. And our minimum will be -1 times 2/3, which will just be 2/3. Instead of taking 5 points and changing each of those 5 points, we develop a few shortcuts for graphing sine and cos. One, we know that the period of sine and cos is 2 pi. So what we do is we mark 2 pi somewhere along our x-axis, and we split it into 4 equal sections. So our x-axis and our y-axis. And for sine, sine always starts on the center line going up. So we would start on the center line. At pi over 2, it'll be at our maximum. At pi, back to the center line. 3 pi over 2 at your minimum. And 2 pi back to your center line. And so you can graph it with those 5 points. And from this, we can see that our amplitude, which is from our center line to a maximum, or from our center line to our minimum, that distance from here to here is 2/3. So your amplitude starts off at 1, and when you multiply by 2/3, your amplitude becomes 2/3. Now in part B, -4 cos of x, again that's going to be a vertical stretch. And your values of 1 and -1 are now going to be -4 and 4. Once again, we mark out a period along our x-axis, divide it into 4 equal sections. Now, where does cos normally start? Cos normally starts at a maximum. But what does that -4 do? The 4 will multiply your y values by 4, but that negative is going to be a flip. It's going to flip it over the x-axis. So instead of starting at a maximum, cos this time is going to start at a minimum. And the reason we always set up our 4 sections is then we can bounce from maximum to center line to minimum and so forth. So if we're at our minimum, at pi over 2, we're going to get back to our center line. At pi, we're going to be at our maximum, 3 pi over 2 back to our center line, and 2 pi back to our minimum. Now we can draw our cos curve through that. And our amplitude here is 4. So one thing that you're going to notice is a pattern. Whatever number is in front of sine or cos will always be the amplitude. But if there's a negative there, like there is this time with a negative 4 cos, our amplitude is always a positive number because it's a distance from the center line to the maximum. The negative flipped our cos graph, so it started at a minimum instead of starting at a maximum, but the amplitude is still positive 4. So if you got these questions, I mean, we graph them just to get used to and practice our graphing, but if you got these questions as a multiple choice or short answer on a quiz, test, or in the final exam, you could just look at it and say, I know the amplitude is 2/3. I know the amplitude is 4. Whatever that number in front will be your amplitude. All right, questions for practice are 3A and B, 4, 5, and 9.